Yiboneh, Yiboneh Hamikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh Hamikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Neshama shir chadash.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome home to Torah. A warm welcome home to Torah. We are in the Yiboneh Beit Midrash, and we are going over the Parashat Shavua, Parashat Tetzaveh. Now, before we begin, I just want to mention a few things. Besides the fact that these classes are very text intensive, although very spiritually enlightening. So we do encourage you to follow the original Hebrew text. There'll be a link down below so that you could follow the black and white copies, not the pretty highlighted copies that I have. That's like number one. We really encourage you to learn Hebrew. Number two, the mitzvah of Matanas Le'Evyonim. Come Purim, which is next Thursday. Oh, next Thursday night there won't be a shir. Right? We're going to be listening, reading the Megillah, and getting ready for all the other mitzvahs that are over the next 3 days. The following, 3 days. It's a big thing to spend Purim in Jerusalem. And I want to dedicate tonight's learning, especially in the merit of the yard site of a friend of mine, his mother's yard site, Leah bat Shlomo Shmuel. And while we have, and we should always have at the forefront of our minds, the success, the victory of the army, the immediate return, a safe return of all the remaining hostages. And without any further ado, about the mitzvah of Matanas Le'Evyonim. So we, at Yiboneh, Olam Chesed Yiboneh, we distribute a lot of charity. And this, especially this season, we're going to be giving out a lot, but we can't give it out unless you give it, right? We're like conduits. We're going to be a shliach of your mitzvah. So down below, there's a link in how you could participate in the mitzvah of helping the needy, especially at this time, through the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, the gifts to the poor. Okay, let's begin. In chapter 30, verse 1, we are now beginning a new kli. The kli, the vessel, is the incense altar. It's gold. It's a gold altar, and it's sitting inside of the holies. So you have the Holy of Holies, which the only object in that room is the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, with the luchos, both the broken tablets, the full tablets, Sefer Torah, and there's a vial of man, and there's Aaron's staff, and it's behind a curtain. Behind the curtain. Okay, it's very important to know that. On the inside, or let's say outside of the curtain, so you have three vessels. You're going to have number one, you're going to have the menorah to the south. Okay, so it's east of the curtain, but it's towards the south. And then you have the shulchan, which is on the northern side of that room. But dead center, I shouldn't say dead center, but in the center, a little bit further out to the east, you have this altar that we're talking about. And the altar is used for the incense. Daily, twice is offered. And you have, interestingly enough, what do you have? You have a crown. There's a crown on it. There's only three vessels that have crowns. That's the Aron Kodesh itself. And then in this room, the other two vessels, not the menorah. So the shulchan has a crown, and the altar that we're discussing tonight has a crown. And what else did I want to mention about it? The measurements. The measurements are going to come up that it's 1 cubit. Cubit is an amma from the elbow to the fingertip. So it's 1 by 1, which is perfectly square, and then it's 2 amos high. As opposed to the other altar, which is outside of the holies, it's in the courtyard, of the tabernacle. And that is where the animal sacrifices are done, not the incense as we mentioned on the inside, but the animal sacrifices are done on the outside. And the dimensions of that altar is 5 amos by 5 amos, much bigger. And it's even taller. It's 3 amos high. Okay, so now that we have discussed that we're going to be talking about the altar, the incense altar, which is on the inside, as opposed to the animal offering altar where you are burning the animals, it's acting as a kapara. It's acting as an atonement. And we're going to hear what these things atone for. So the Yakar begins, Kafi Hanira. It certainly seems, Kafi Hanira, it seems, Sheshnei Mizbachot Elu, that these 2 altars, the ones I just described, the one on the inside, the one on the outside, both of them, Ne'irchu Shnehem L'chaper Al HaNefesh HaChotet, that both of them are arranged. The whole concept is for the arrangement of both of them to atone for the nefesh. Now the nefesh, I do need to give a little bit of a brief. There are 5 levels of our soul. The nefesh is the most lowest animalistic part of our soul. Then you have the ruach, then you have the neshama, then you have the chaya, and then you have yechida. Okay, we're not going to go too Kabbalistic tonight, but you do need to know about these different levels. Right now, we're talking about the nefesh. That's like it says in the Torah that the nefesh is in the blood. So the animals have a nefesh. We have a nefesh. We're not allowed to eat the blood. It's the lowest part of our soul. It's called the nefesh hachotet, the soul that sinned. Ki mizbach hanachoshet, that means the copper altar. When we were in the desert and the tabernacle was transported from place to place, so the altar, as I described, that where the sacrifices were burnt, that was made of copper and could be moved. Once you have the temple, we have a temple mount, Bezrat Hashem, it should be rebuilt soon in our days, where we have an altar made from the ground. That is permanent and not movable. So, again, you had the incense altar, which was lighter and smaller and could be moved, and that was on the inside. And on the outside, in the tabernacle, in the chatzer, in the courtyard, you had this special mizbeach hanachoshet, a copper altar. And what did it do? The copper altar that's outside, bo lekaper al chelkei hachomer, that it comes to atone for the part of us that is very physical. V'haguf hanaguf be'even achet, which the body itself is stricken, so to speak, with or through sin, through the stone of sin. And the olav, meaning on top of this copper altar, makriving habale chayim. That's where the offerings of the bali chayim, of the animal sacrifices were brought. Haboyim temurato. They came in exchange, nefesh for nefesh. Okay, so the animal which has only the nefesh behemoth, the animal soul, that sacrifice was ki'ilu, it's as if what we deserved or was going up in atonement for us. Kiyesh lehem dimyon el chomer adam, because the animals which have this animal soul, that's the only thing that they have in similarity to human beings, but that at least is a similarity. The word dimyon, right? It's a similarity to the physicality of man. Utmunat hamizbeach yokiach. The Yakar wants to express through the pattern, through the design of the altar, that's going to prove his point. He's going to use that as proof for his, we'll call it a thesis. Kizot komoto damta lekoma ta'adam benoni shalosh amos. That the idea that the external, the outside altar is 3 amos high, that is damata, it's compared to the height of an average human being. Certain people in this room are shorter, but okay, we're not going to get into that. But the average human being is 3 cubits, 3 amos. V'chein habehemos hanikravim doimim el nefesh habehemes sheba adam. So too, the very fact that animals are offered on that outside altar, the mizbeach hanachoshet, they're being offered. They are similar, right, to our own nefesh behemis that's within man, and a nefesh is temurat nefesh. So that lower soul of the animal is an exchange for the atonement for the lower soul within man. Ki mitam ze nemar b'minchas oni. So if you go to source number 2, it mentions, right? I'm sorry, it's source number 3. In source number 3, if a person brings a meal offering to the Lord, right? Let's say normally you're dealing with a korban, an animal, a korban of Bali Chayim, but if you don't have enough money, right? We're talking about a voluntary offering. If you don't have enough money, so that we're talking about an ani, a poor person, he's going to bring a mincha. Mincha is flour, Flour, right? He's going to bring a meal offering. Now, interestingly enough, the verse says, "V'nefesh ki takriv." All the other places, if you look at Rashi, so he said when a person brings, that's how the English translation. But in Hebrew, it's nefesh ki takriv, the korban mincha l'Hashem. Rashi says, literally, if a soul brings, right, nefesh, these are sacrifices which were donated voluntarily. The only one instance that the Torah calls the person a nefesh is specifically where that person is bringing the flour offering, the meal offering. So you might think that it's not as valuable as the animal offering. Remember, he's poor. Whatever amount of money it is, it's a lot for him or her, right? So it's as if they're giving their life, as Rashi explains. Now, who usually donates a meal offering? A poor person, because we all know that flour is going to be a lot less expensive than either birds or animals. So what does God say? Malav katuv. It's as if I, God, am accounting for that person as if he sacrificed his very soul. Even though, remember, for him, it was a lot of money, because he has nothing. So enough for a cake, a piece of matzah, right? That, maybe in a month's time, in a month and a week, we're going to be spending a lot of money on matzah. They call them lechem oni, because it's very expensive, right? Anyway, that's a private joke for those who get it. So the Yakar goes on and says that this is the reason, this very, very reason that it says by the flour offering of the poor person, the word v'nefesh ki takriv. Ki ein biyado lahakriv nefesh habehema temurat nafshi. He doesn't have in his hand, meaning he doesn't have the ability, he doesn't have the money, he doesn't have the resources to offer the nefesh of an animal in place of his own soul. What does he bring? Mincha solis. He's going to bring fine flour. Regarding that, the verse says, the nefesh. God is saying it's ma'ala ania katuv, right? It's ki'ilu. It's as if this person is hikriv nafsho, as if he is offering his own soul. But again, there are 5 levels of the soul, and I want to just tell you a little bit about them. So we did mention what they were quickly, right? Nefesh, Ruach, Nishama, Chaya, the Yechida. And we're going to talk about the Yechida shortly. Rav Noach Weinberg gave a great series on the 5 levels of pleasure. And we're going to discuss specifically the highest level of pleasure, which is Dveikus Hashem, which is communion with God. But he gave us, I'll tell you what it was based on, a seminar based on the 5 levels of your soul, the 5 levels of pleasure within your soul, and he went through, and he got a lot of this from like a straw man in Mesilas Yesharim, from Reb Chaim Luzzatto. I think what I'll do is I'll put a link into the description box below where we'll go into greater detail, Rav Noach Weinberg's ideas behind the 5 levels of pleasure. But basically the lowest level, the 5th level, is just physical and material pleasures, because you got to remember that man was created, God created us as like interested in physical pleasures. I mean, that is what we are. We are beings that are interested in physical and material pleasures. One of the main objects of Rav Noach's seminar was helping you distinguish between counterfeit pleasures and real pleasures, true pleasures, pleasures that are eternal. And we're going to talk about that, eternal pleasure. I don't want to give too much away, but we will discuss that in the future, right, that the tzaddikim will have crowns on their heads, and there'll be nenem ziva shchina in the world to come. Basically, what does that mean? We'll get to it shortly, but we're talking about crowns on the heads of the tzaddikim, where they are experiencing the ultimate bliss of the divine pleasure, of the warmth of the light emanating from God's own essence, so to speak. The next level up, like in other words, everything has an exchange rate. So you would be willing to give up physical material pleasure for either money or for love, something that has a higher exchange rate, and then of course using it for God's, to serve Hashem properly. The third next level of pleasure is a cause. How many people are willing to die for a cause or to actually appreciate goodness? The next class, the second class from the top, is creativity, which is, one of the reasons we're here is mechadesh things, and to feel that we are partners in creation. And of course, now the highest level of pleasure that one can assume is, and that's after mastering, the difference between the counterfeit pleasures and the real pleasures, after mastering the first 4 levels, an encounter with God. Absolute bliss, basically being in a total state of gratitude and connection with the goodness that God is. This is too short of an explanation. It's not at all for tonight. I will put the link below, and I encourage you all to go and find about the 5 levels of pleasure relating to the 5 levels of our soul. The next paragraph begins of mikol makom gam haneshama tzricha kapara. What is still necessary, even though the nefesh, the behemoth, right, the lowest animal part of our soul will need atonement, that's true. What about that middle level called the neshama? Guess what? It also needs some atonement. It came into the world pure, and Bizrat Hashem, we'll see, we should leave this world with all of our tshuva and repentance and kapara in place. Acharei asher hutama beguf hanaguf hazeh, after the fact that by sinning our bodies have become stricken, so to speak, ve'ena mitkaperet b'nefesh habehema. So the outer altar is only really mechaper on the nefesh, but what about the neshama? The neshama is not getting the proper kapara through the animal sacrifice. Ki ein dimyon zelazeh, because you cannot even compare the two. Ki ruach b'nei adam oila lamala. What does this soul, the neshama of man, it wants to be elevated. Oh, that's why it's like a flame. We're going to talk about that too. The soul is constantly trying to reach higher and higher. So that's the nature of the neshama. The ruach behema yoredet lamata. Whereas the animal part of us, and we know that the animal wants to go down, to descend below. And there's a verse in Ecclesiastes, number 4 in the source sheet, who knows that the spirit of the children of man is that which ascends on high. Ruach b'nei adam ha'oila hi lamala. But what about the spirit of the beast? Ruach ha'behema ha'yoredet hi lamata la'aretz, is that which descends below to the earth. So the Yakar wants to explain a good question based on that. Ech tihiyeh nefesh ha'behema hakola v'nifsad Tumort neshama ha'adam hakayemet lenetzach. How is it possible for the animal soul, which is the animal being sacrificed, that is due to expire and be destroyed, how is that ever exchanged for the neshama of a man? Remember, the neshama is not the nefesh, the neshama is the higher part of man, that is actually eternal. This temporal nefesh of the behemoth is not going to atone for the neshama of a human. Remember, we're trying to answer the question, what is the purpose of this inner incense altar? Okay? Al kain siva el chai. That's why God commanded, the living God, Lasot mizbach akatoris. This is, according to the Yakar, why you have this incense altar on the inside. Hamala oshan. What happens? I don't know if you've ever seen incense, but like a barbecue, everyone must have seen something like this, that the smoke is just going up. That's what it's doing. The smoke ascends, the reach nichoach laHashem, and it brings a pleasing fragrance to God. Lechaper al ruach b'nei adam ha'olahi lamala ka'ashan ha'katoris. And that's inner altar, the incense altar, right? That's through the incense. It's going to atone for the spirit of man, the spirit is constantly going up, just like the smoke of the incense. Now he brings a proof text from Song of Songs. It's chapter 3, verse 6. Who is coming up from the desert like columns of smoke? Perfumed. This is talking about the Jewish people who are full of mitzvahs, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense. But in Hebrew, it's mikuteret mor ulavana, right? It's ketmirot ashan. These are columns of smoke that are going up. So what the Yakar, I think, is trying to say here is that it's true that the incense is made up of two of these, mor and lavana, right? Myrrh and frankincense, but that it's perfumed. The incense is causing a good smell. In other words, there's an improvement, right? And what does the Yakar say this is talking about? These ingredients, that's shalmas tovim, that are good actions. Our mitzvahs are like incense going up and giving God a pleasing fragrance. Hashem is schlepping nachas, so to speak, from the Jews when they do mitzvahs. Lahorot, to teach you, wait till you hear this. Lahoros, natan bilvavenu mashene'emar. In order to teach you, to place upon your hearts. We have to know this point, and it's in our chapter, in Exodus chapter 30, verse 36, just a few verses later. And you shall crush some of it finely. And we say this every morning, right? Part of the process of making the incense is to crush it very finely. V'shachachta mimena hadek. To make it very fine as fine can be. So those words the Yakar says is a remez l'neshama. Why do you think it's a hint to the neshama? Because the neshama is daka min hadaka, which means it's so ethereal it cannot even be felt. It's so thin, it's so fine in a good way. It's not crushed. We're talking about the neshama is so fine, and you're crushing the incense to be so fine. Shetzricha gam hi kapora kidei la'alota el makom chotzva. That eventually, through the incense itself, it's going to prove itself. It is going to make the kapara, the atonement, in order that the soul will then be refined so much that it goes up to the very place from which it was hewn. And where was the neshama hewn from? Well, there's two ways to look at it. Either we talk about Hashem himself, it's a chelik Elokai mima'al, it's part of Hashem himself, or we can use the other phrase that our neshamas were hewn from the bottom of the kisei kavod, from the the throne of glory itself. Now, we did discuss in the introduction that the number system, the dimensions were, at least we're talking about the altar, the inner altar being 1 amma by 1 amma. So the Yakar points out, Umispar amos mizbeach zeyokiach, that the very dimensions of this altar is going to prove his point. Yiboneh Mar, because relating to the size of this altar, it's amma arko va'ama rachbo. It's 1 by 1. What does that tell you? See, when it came to the shulchan and it came to the ark, they were bigger numbers, 1.5, 2.5, whatever it was, or 2. It was not 1 by 1. This altar is specifically 1 by 1. Lekaper bo al haneshama shenikret yechida. It's coming to teach you, because 1 by 1, that it's coming to atone for the soul, that the soul itself is called 1. Unified, 1, or singular. And there's a verse in Psalms, chapter 22, verse 21. If you look at number 7, right? Hatzila mecherev nafshi. I highlight, nafshi means my soul, from the hand of the dog, the grip of the dog, but it's going back when it says yechidati, it's talking about my soul. The soul is called yechida. Kamosha Kadosh Baruch Hu echad, just like God is one. Kach hi yechida, so too our soul is one. Now, how high was it? We mentioned that it's 2 amos. The outer altar was 3 amos high, the size of an average person. But the inner altar was 2 amos high. Ki ruach b'nei ha'adam hi ha'olam b'makom b'zulat makom sheyesh la toch haguf. Basically, I'll say what I think it means, and then we'll read it literally, that the neshama transcends the limitations of the body. Okay? That the lower amma is like the body, the higher amma is the soul, which is above the body. Now, literally, it says, Ki ruach b'nei ha'adam hi ha'ola, that the spirit of man is above the place, aside from the place which is the guf, which is the body itself. Uzman haktarato baboker ube'erev. This incense was offered. The incense was offered in the morning and in the late afternoon. Ki hanashama baboker hibo biyalduto. What do we say? You've heard me say it, that we're born again, right? We're born again. We should be feeling every single day, Moda Ani, Hashem gave me back my soul. Before I went to sleep, I placed it back into his possession. So in the neshama in the morning is coming as an infant, in his infancy, as if he was just born. That's the Zman Zrichas Shimsho. That's the time of, let's say, his birth, the Netzachama, the shining of his sun, S-U-N. Ube'erev hi shabo el aviha kimei nu'ureha. And comes the evening time, you're going back to your father as in the days of your youth. And he's going to say, halavai, what does that mean? If it only were, shetei yetzia kibia below chet. That when you expire, and it could be whether we're talking about daily giving your soul over, or at the end of 120 years, when you leave, halavai, we should be leaving our soul clean, like we came in without any sin. Ubah katoret behetivo es neros baboker. So simultaneously, right? When I say simultaneously, meaning around the same time period in the morning and the evening, there's something happening with the menorah. Okay, that time period in the morning when the early morning incense is being burnt, that's the time that the Kohanim are cleaning behetivo. They're cleaning the neros. They were burning all night long. Okay, they were burning from evening until morning. So the morning time is time to clean up. What about the erev? Be'erev b'halot et haneros. And nighttime is when, right before dark, is when the Kohen is going to ignite, light, kindle the lamp. And in Daniel chapter 8, verse 26, look at number 8, the vision of the evening and the morning that was said is true. There's something emsdik, umara, just the sight of the evening and the morning brings truth. What is that? What is the truth? Kihu mityaches. What was Daniel doing? He was relating the idea, as it says in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 27, chapter 20, verse 27, number 9, man's soul is the Lord's lamp. Ner Hashem, the lamp of God, the vessel of God, that's us, is the Nishmas Adam, is the soul of man. Okay, so Ki haboker zman hatabat, the morning is the time for improvement. Ner Elokim Nishmas Adam. Maaseh, that's the time to perform the mitzvahs. It's the time of action during the day, during your lifetime. Lenakot atzma, and to cleanse yourself, just like they clean, look behind me, you have a menorah, right? To clean the glass jars. You have to clean it. The morning, to clean it. Lenakot atzma mikol chaludat ether, from all the dross or the dirt or the ash. That's the time to clean. What about the evening time? Ube'erev zman shkiat shimsho. That's the time that the sun is setting. Now, they say going west. I don't know, going south. There's an expression, the person's dying. So they're, right? So their sun is setting. So it could be, again, on a daily basis before you go to sleep, you give your soul over, or we're really talking about the end of 120 years. Huzman ha'alat haneshama el mokom chotzpah. That's the time of the ascension of the soul going back to the place that it was hewn from, meaning from God Himself. Uba haktara zu lechaper al neshama. So now we understand better that the outer altar, that's going to be an atonement for the nefesh. The inner altar is going to atone for the neshama, the incense. And that eventually, after 120 years, or at the end of the day, you're going to leave from this world without any sin, just as when you entered. Just to get a little feel for the word niftar, right? When someone passes away, every secular Jew knows the word niftar means he's expired, he's gone. Okay, it is related to the idea, let's say, for example, someone got fired, someone was let go, right? There's this concept. They use the same word because it really means exempt. You're exempt. You're no longer, like if you don't send the email, you're fired, right? What is that? Like, don't show up tomorrow. We want to know 5 things you accomplished, yesterday, right? Are you still alive? Will you even answer this email? So basically, niftar means you are exempt. You cannot fulfill any more mitzvahs, right? Not that you're fired, but you're laid off, right? You don't have any more obligations. While we are still alive, we are chayiv. We are obligated in many things. But once you have passed on to the next world, you are patur. You are not chayiv. There's nothing to accomplish. All of this life is given to us a very short 120 years to accomplish, to do ma'asim tovim. And therefore, I know Pesach is coming up. Maybe we'll discuss it more during the Omer. What does it mean to count time? Make time count. And not to just what they call killing time. Right? Time is not worth wasting. Can never get it back. Now, I mentioned that there is a zer, there is a crown on this golden altar for incense. Zer zahav shel mizbeach zeh keneged haschar shel tzadikim leolam haba. It's going to be parallel the reward of the righteous in the world to come. Shenenin min ziv hashchina va'atroteihem beroshehem, that they are going to be deriving benefit, experiencing pleasure from the shine of God's presence. And interestingly, the Gemara in Brachos Yud Zayin Amud Aleph explains, and their crowns are on their heads. So the Yakar points out, why doesn't it just say crowns on their heads? Why is the word the atrotehem? It's there. It's possessive. They own these crowns. These tzaddikim own the crown that's on their heads. Remez, the Yakar says, it's hinting to the idea laosem ataros shekonu bahar Sinai ba'amram nasev v'nishma. It's hinting to those crowns that the Jewish people, that the Israelites received when they acquired the Torah. They acquired these crowns at Har Sinai, where the Torah was given. When we said naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will try to understand. It's brought down in Gemara Shabbos. The idea is, then I think I have it written here, number 10. Actually, it's number 11 already. I did skip number 10. It says, and interestingly enough, in Brachos 17a, that in the world to come, in the name of Rav, is not like this world. In the world to come, there won't be eating or drinking. There's no procreation. There's no negotiations of business. There's no jealousy. There's certainly no hatred. And there is absolutely no competition. But what will happen? The righteous sit with their crowns upon their heads, enjoying the splendor of the divine presence. And it was based on an earlier verse, Exodus chapter 24, verse 11, where at Har Sinai itself, it says they beheld God and they ate and drank. Now there's many different ways to explain this verse. We're not going to go into the negative, because this could be held as a negative, which we're going to just skip for a second. The idea is that when they ate and drank at Har Sinai, they didn't really eat and drink because that wouldn't have been appropriate. But that they experienced God as if they were being satiated with good food and good drink. Try to use your imagination. You go to a gourmet restaurant, I don't know if they're just from one little drip of wine on your tongue or a little sauce, you can just feel it through your whole body. So this is when they were at Har Sinai, they didn't eat or drink. Okay, we're not talking about the negative side, because there is an opinion this was actually why Nadav and Avihu were taken out. So just aside from that, the way to explain it here is that they didn't really eat and drink at all, but they experienced such pleasure from God's presence, as it says, meaning that beholding God's countenance is tantamount to eating and drinking. Now, our Gemara here, when it says Naaseh v'nishma, the Gemara in Shabbos 88a explains that, yes, there were 600,000 administering angels that came and tied 2 crowns to each Israelite, one for Naaseh, the other one for Nishma. But after the golden calf, and this is worthy of investigation, why did it take one angel to bring 2 crowns, but when they were removed, you needed 1 angel per crown? So 1,200,000 angels came and took these crowns away. But according to Rabbi Hanina, right, it's true, at Chorev, they put on the instruments, the ornaments, which was the crowns, and at Chorev they were removed, unfortunately. But later on, look down, Reish Lakish says, in the future, what's God going to do? He's going to give us back these crowns. Okay? That's why they're called their crowns, because they made a kinyan on those crowns, and those very crowns will be returned to them, as it says in Isaiah chapter 35, verse 10, and the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. Now, there's a lot of ways to explain, was it really a crown, or is it like the Torah, the Keter Torah? The Torah is that's the crown. I mean, you could just feel your brain, tingling, the elasticity. It's elastic.
Yeah.
You're constantly making, when you're learning Torah, you're constantly making these connections. And I'm using my own words, but maybe these are famous words. You're like mind melding with God, right? You're connecting to God's brain, so to speak, seichel. When you're learning Torah, let's say you're connecting to His thoughts. I mean, that's a big deal. Don't take it so lightly. So these crowns that we're going to get is like basically saying you're going to know the whole Torah. Torah will not need to be taught to any other Jew, right? It's only to the non-Jews. We're going to be a light to the nations in its truest sense, and every Jew will become a teacher. So you might as well get ready, because really the truth is it has to do with what you made the attempt to learn. And then we all know that if you go to a shir and you didn't fully chop it, you didn't get it completely, that in the world to come, you'll understand it with clarity. But that's only if you went to the shir. That's only if you made the attempt to open the book. It's only if you ask the questions. Then B'ezrat Hashem, absolute clarity, the crown on the head, the I can't pronounce it, but the elasticity will be complete. Okay, so now in the Yakar, at the top of the second page, so it says in the Gemara, B'chorev ta'anum, so we were loaded with the crowns, B'chorev parkum, but unfortunately also after the golden calf, those same crowns were removed. Says Reish Lakish, Asir Kadosh Baruch Hu lachziram lehem, in the future God will return those crowns to them. And now we understand why Chazal said, Va'atrotehem b'roshehem. It's those same crowns that was taken away from us, those crowns in the future will be returned to us. Now, we did speak about this idea of the physical location of this altar being directly opposite the Aron HaKodesh. So this is a crown on the altar that's sitting opposite the Torah, so to speak, the ark that has the Torah in it. So the pasuk in verse 6, which I'm not sure I put down, yes, it's number 12. It's chapter 30, verse 6. And you shall place it, right? This is the incense altar, in front, directly in front of the dividing curtain, and which is upon the ark of testimony, meaning that parochet is separating you from the ark of testimony, but it's specifically the ark of testimony in front of the ark cover, which is upon the testimony, which I will arrange to meet with you. That's where Hashem is meeting us. So that's what the Hebrew says. V'natato to lifnei ha'parochet asher al Aron ha'edus lifnei ha'kaporet asher al ha'edus. The Yakar wants to emphasize, Hainu mechuvan keneged ha'aron mibachutz. It is directly opposite the holy ark on the outside of the curtain. Kol zeh bo lahoros. It's all coming to teach you one important lesson. Shazer shel mizbach hakatoris. The very crown that's on this altar is referring to hamarames atrotehem b'roshehem. To remember the reward of the tzaddikim is this crown, the crown that's on their heads. Hainu zer ha'toira. V'haketer shenitan lehem b'chorev. It's referring to the crown of Torah. You're sitting as a tzaddik, somehow like invested. Is that a good word, Sholem? You're like invested into this crown of the Mizbech HaKatoris. And I would highly recommend to read, if you could do it twice a day, but at least once a day, the incense offering, right? This is hinting to the Torah, that the crown of Torah, and the crowns that are going to be given back to you that was taken away at Chorev, Ati lachzirim lehem. Then the future will be returned back to you. Now the last paragraph, Achas b'shana. I'm skipping 2 lines. He's just referring to something he says by the Mizbech HaNechoshes, which we're not dealing with right now. he mentions that atones for brazenness. But in verse 10, look in verse 10. You'll see that. I didn't put it down. I'm sorry I didn't bring it down. So here we go. Chapter 30, verse 10 says, Aaron shall bring atonement upon its horns once a year, from the blood of the sin offering of the atonements once a year. He shall bring atonement upon it for your generations. It's holy of holies to Hashem. What does it mean once a year? It's talking about Yom Kippur. Talking about Yom Kippur. So the Yakar says, Achas b'shana ki be'etzam hayomahu. The essence of that day, Yom Kippur, Naseh Adam Naki Kamalach Hashares Minachet. Why do we dress all in white? Right? Why do we not need to eat and drink? Because we're like angels. Angels don't eat and drink. Angels, I guess they're white, whatever, they dress in white. So we're like angels on Yom Kippur. The neshama tachzor l'taharata. And the soul returns back to its pure state. Kimnei olam ukshanim kadmanios, like it was originally. And then he has these words, Hamaskil Yishma v'yosiv lekach, and the highly spiritual, intellectual person will understand this and will add their own chidushim. He says in the very beginning of the Parashat dealing with the Kalim that there are many things that are said. You don't need to make anything up. Take what exists and find some chidush, find some important point to expand upon. Don't start from scratch. You're only going to get lost. Take the vast amount of information, I'm going to call it divine information, not artificial information, right? Take the divine information that we have and delve deeply into it and find what we call novel ideas within it. You don't need to invent anything. You just need to uncover and discover. And with that, I'll just remind you, Mitanis Levyonim, right? It's coming up. Okay, there's a link below. We like to say at the end of all of our shirs, the shirin, right? That one should have an unbelievable Shabbos and a great life. But I want you to know, next week we won't have a shir. Have a great Freilich HaPurim, and may it be really the beginning of our personal and national redemption. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you in a few weeks, and have a great life.
Shama shir shir